Oh, hi. It's nice to see you. Haven't seen you for a while. It's good timing that you showed up right now because we've received a message. It's called Dear Atheist, Agnostic, Agnostic Atheist, Anti-theist, Freethinker, and Naturalist. Actually, never mind. That says anti-atheist, but he means anti-theist. This guy's looking for attention from every direction, huh? Well, hey, I'm at least one of those things, so I'm not just going to ignore this. Hello, sir. What do you got?
All men, all humans. Deep down, we all know there's a God that exists.
Hi, you're getting to the point right away. I love that. So it's everybody already knows there's a God, and you're addressing this to the people who already know that you're wrong. I think you'll find that's not a very useful approach, but at least it's funny sometimes.
We all know. You see, when you just look at the world, in my opinion, that's enough.
Look at the world? That's enough for what? For everyone to know there's a God, or for you to know everyone knows there's a God? It doesn't really matter, does it? Because that doesn't sound like enough for either.
In fact, being logical is to admit and acknowledge that there is a creator.
Oh, that's what being logical is? It's not just a logical conclusion. No, apparently admitting God exists is the nature of logic itself. That doesn't sound like the same thing.
It says a fool has said in his heart there is no God.
We're going to Psalm 14:1 within seconds of starting. What are you trying to speedrun, making the worst version of this argument? What the hell?
And that makes sense, because how can you see a whole world? How can you see systems? How can you see biology? How can you see all the fascinating things that I don't even fully understand myself, that these scientists, whatever, how can you see all these things and just think, oh, that was random? There's no creator.
How can you see, and then you list a bunch of random crap, all of that stuff that I don't understand? How can you look at that stuff and say that's just random? There was no creator. Which it seems like somehow you're taking as equivalent statements. No creator and random. Look, obviously that dichotomy is false. There are other options than there was a creator or it was all random. And I think that's shown decently well by your examples. I mean, your examples were the world, systems, just in general, I guess, and biology. Well, I would say all three of those can be rolled into natural systems. And the behavior of a natural system is not random. You talk about these things being studied by scientists. Well, the reason that they're able to study them in any meaningful sort of way is that while on the biggest level, maybe these things are kind of unpredictable because they're so complicated, they're not actually random when you zoom in. These systems operate through understandable natural events. Cause and effect, events you can predict, processes that you can diagram in a textbook. Sure, in anything in life there's going to be some randomness involved on some level, but that's not the driving force. In evolution, for example, which I'm going to assume is a point of contention, mutations can be random events, but mutations aren't actually what's driving speciation. They're just the input to that process. The actual process is natural selection, and what lives and what dies, or what reproduces and what doesn't, those are not random. I'm kind of being an idiot even bothering to address this because really, what you're actually saying is, I don't understand it, therefore God. You said you look around at this stuff that you don't understand, and how could you think its cause was anything other than a creator? Well, why do you think its cause was a creator? It sounds like your reason is ignorance, which sounds like a bad argument.
How can you see the order of the human body, the complexity, how every system works together in order to sustain and maintain life? That could not have been random.
Yeah, I know. You just explained that it's not random. That's what I'm telling you. The basic function of biological systems is not random. And so when an organism has a mutation in its DNA that causes the production of some different protein, although the mutation itself may have been effectively random, the effect of the protein on the function of the biological system into which it's introduced is not. And the effect of that on the survival ability of the organism in question also is not. And the effect of the survival or death of that organism on the ecosystem also is not. And the effect of that change in the ecosystem on population-level adaptations of organisms still living within that ecosystem also is not. There's very little randomness involved in natural selection. And the proposal is that this cascade of non-random consequences results in compounding changes in biological systems, leading, yes, to systems as complex as the human body. Now, I don't expect that you'll accept that. That's fine. But you gotta understand that you talking about something that you clearly don't understand and say you don't understand, and then saying, well, it can't be that, it has to be God, is not a compelling argument. You know, if you wanted to talk about anything like this, you probably should have figured out what any of it is to start with, and then figured out how it actually relates to the conversation before you went calling out a bunch of random groups of people in your title.
Why do I have emotions? Why do I think? Why do I have a conscience?
I'm not going to answer these questions for you. If you're interested in the answers, you can go start reading. Why are you calling me to watch your video if you're just going to ask a bunch of questions, assuming there's no way to ever find an answer, and then pretend like your preferred answer's just magically right? You don't need anyone else here for that. Listening to this twaddle serves no function to an atheist, agnostic, atheist, anti-theist, freethinker, or naturalist. If you want to waste someone's time on this, waste your own.
Why do I know when something is bad? If I'm just a biological being, why can't I just stab someone in the neck and just laugh about it?
Well, some people do that. If not being able to do that proves what? God gave you morality? Then what does being able to do it do? Is this one of those things that conveniently points to God no matter which way it goes? And what is the argument for this even pointing to God at all? Like, humans make normative judgments about actions. Something, something, therefore God. Fill in the blank for me. Make it make sense.
In fact, why do we have a standard for morality? Why do we know what's good, what's evil? Like, why? How?
I'm hearing a lot of questions. You ask why this, how that, as if the asking of the question will be the end of the discussion. No, these are not unanswerable questions. They're not impossible to investigate, and if they were, and they just stayed stalled at why and how forever, that wouldn't make you right by default. What are you expecting here? That you asking the question is going to be taken to demonstrate the answer? Yeah, and the way you win a chess game is when you ask if the other person wants to play it with you.
Could that have been by chance?
Well, yeah, it could have, but I don't think it was. I also don't think God did it. I personally think biological and cultural evolution together go a lot further to explain human moral thinking than some sort of supernatural implanting of ideas. I would say it also better accounts for the variation I mentioned before. I know, incredible. A third option? What? No way. That's not a thing, ever. Every question is multiple choice. A or B. Take your pick.
I don't think so.
I know you don't think so. I don't either. Do you think that means I agree with you?
I think that our conscience is in fact a testament to God's creation. That we know what's evil, we know what's wrong.
That's wonderful that you think that. How exciting for you. I know there are religious people, though. This is not new information. So what do you want from me here? Why am I supposed to care what you think? Does that make it more likely?
I feel like that very fear of acknowledging evil is what many atheists run to.
That's great. I'm thrilled to be hearing about your feelings. I'm sure that'll do it. I'll be a theist any minute now. Man, I'm moody today. I'll lean into it.
Because at the end of the day, these very people who claim to not believe in God, when they hear Jesus' name, anything to do with God, they get angry.
No, not mostly. Most of the time when people get irritated, it's because you're talking shit. Either you're talking shit about them, like you're about to here, or you're just spitting and pissing on reason and the truth, as you've already done here, which is annoying to people who care about those kind of things. This whole thing about atheists being mad at God and Jesus is really just an unwillingness to accept that their problem is with your personal behavior.
They reject it. They close their ears.
My ears are wide open, bro. I'm listening to every word you're saying. Just because I don't immediately accept them doesn't mean I'm not hearing you. Your argument from shrug is not nearly as compelling as you think it is.
They cringe. They feel uneased.
No.
The reason is because Jesus' name holds power. That's the name that every knee shall bow.
Okay, say it more then. Sprinkle it in 5 times a sentence, see if that works. I have seen people try basically that. It doesn't work. Go figure. See, muttering about Jesus sounds impressive to Jesus people. But see, I'm not a Jesus people. I never was one. To me, it sounds like a joke, which is actually what I thought it was when I was younger. Turns out I was wrong on that one. Had to admit being wrong there. I have no idea how you take this stuff so seriously when you hear it, but you do. It's a remarkable quirk of human psychology, and I have a lot of difficulty empathizing with it. Why are you like this? How are you like this? Oh, hey, I asked why and how something. That must prove God.
That power and authority is the very reaction why you react the way you react.
Right. I said before that I was hearing every word you were saying, and I was up until that point. Some people might have been struggling a bit with the accent before then, but not me. I'm okay with it for the most part, I can understand it, but I have no idea what you just said, so I guess that ends my streak of understanding.
It's the very reason why you avoid people who proclaim God's name, because you realize that the power of God, the power of the Holy Spirit is convicting you, convicting your soul.
It's the reason why you avoid people who proclaim God's name? Just to be clear here, are you talking about internet atheists? I don't think anybody's avoiding you, bro. I mean, sure, most of us probably aren't going to be interested enough in your bullshit to sit there and listen to it for fun. It's not exactly an absorbing pastime. And sure, people who don't believe in God probably stop going to church eventually. Usually, because they don't believe it. Why would you be involved in a religion that you don't share? But I don't think people generally are running away from you. Where'd you get that idea? You avoid us because we might say Jesus and God at you and that will convict your soul. Okay, then what's with all the people arguing with you in the comments? If they hang around you like that, they're at a high risk of catching a stray Jesus or God and ending up in the hospital with a bad case of conviction. So under this hypothesis, why are they there? Why are so many of us spending our time listening to you guys spout your horse shit? Your spells don't seem to be working the way you think. Yeah, nothing to say to that, huh?
This is the sad thing as well. That's the beginning of you being called to God. That's the beginning of you being called back home. Because at the end of the day, as I said, logically, God does exist.
You don't know what logic is, do you? Logic is not just saying, and then jamming in whatever answer you feel like. It's bad enough that you think a shrug can work as a premise. But what's worse, I think, is that you think that your preferred answer must be the default just because it's yours. That shows an incredible level of self-importance. Which, by the way, that's also probably one of the things that annoys people. If you do have this problem of noticing that people don't want to be around you, that might be part of it.
By the way, man knows their sins. People know what sins are. People know what sins they commit. There's no confusion. People know.
I didn't catch all of that. Something about people know what sins they commit. Well, I don't believe in sin. You can tell me I believe in it 50,000 times. That's not going to change it. But you're not really telling me. You're telling yourself to soothe yourself and cope. And I suppose best of luck to you on that. That being said, people are very good at absorbing the cultural expectations they grew up around, or the ones they encountered later and absorbed. And yeah, when they transgress the boundaries they think other people have for them, there can be a sense of guilt and shame and so forth to that, sure. There's no reason to think there's anything supernatural about that, or that it's tied to the Christian concept of sin in any way other than that a lot of people are brought up in a Christian culture, thinking about their actions through that lens. I wasn't brought up that way, so I don't think about it that way, and I never did. I have never once thought to myself, this thing I'm doing is a sin. But I've been informed an awful lot of times by people who very clearly are not mind readers and in fact barely seem to have a theory of mind, that I do in fact think that way. Which is another reason the whole thing seems like such a joke. You really should stop overextending in this way. I don't think it's doing you any favors.
So it's like, you feel that calling on your heart.
I feel the colo in my heart. Yeah, I don't know. I thought this would be easier, but I'm genuinely having trouble. And by the way, that's mostly my problem, not yours. For the most part, you're pretty clear, but sometimes I just lose it. I do think, though, it might be worthwhile to slow down a little bit. My speech can get kind of incoherent, too, if I talk really fast with no retakes and no editing. Like, you're hearing yourself. You know when things are not all that clear. You could just stop and repeat yourself. You could edit your video, but you don't. So I think there's a little fault on both sides here.
But instead of repenting, instead of saying, you know what, there is indeed a God, and the way I'm living is a life of rejection towards him. Instead of repenting, let me just lie to myself. Let me look for every single illogical reason I can scream God does not exist.
Wow, that sounds like a really stupid-ass strategy. You believe in God, you believe in sin, you know that you're sinning, and you know you're going to be judged for it, and so you pretend there's no God as if that's somehow going to fix it. I'm sorry, but what kind of abject moron do you take me for? No, in that situation, that is not what I would be doing. That is absurd.
Let me look at my suffering. If God exists, why am I suffering in life?
Man, the problem of evil and suffering is really a big one with Christians, isn't it? You know, the funny thing is, like, for the amount that I talk about that argument, because they so often just don't understand what the argument is, I don't even find it that useful. It has a very narrow range of applicability, right? It applies to a very small set of theological views, albeit ones that are pretty popular. It doesn't actually address the existence of a God at all, and I think that there are approaches to Christianity that plausibly sidestep this issue. So it's kind of a big nothing, but they're obsessed with it. And I think that might be less to do with the actual discussion around the existence of God, and more to do with the fact that this is sort of an initial wedge that applies to a lot of people when they still believe. When they start asking questions about God's character and how consistent that is with what the people around them are insisting about God. I think it's just a little bit of dry tinder for that initial spark of doubt. But for the established non-believer, or at least speaking for myself, it's kind of a non-issue. Every time I hear it, I'm like, oh, here we go again with this big waste of time.
Jesus himself, the revelation of God, suffered. Job, an innocent, blameless man, suffered. Christians are told they will suffer for righteousness' sake. That's out of the picture.
So your response to someone asking how suffering is consistent with God's nature is to say that people suffered. Yeah, obviously. Hence the question. You're repeating part of the question as if that answers the question.
Then they say, oh, the world is so evil. Read the whole Bible. Man has been evil since. Man has been evil. God has been delivering. Man was so evil that God himself had to come onto this earth to die for man.
Yes, apparently a species full of imperfection and evil was created by a perfect, all-good being. A totally dirty stream of water coming from a perfectly clean source. Makes perfect sense. And yeah, there was so much evil going on that God himself was unable to fix it. So he had to unalive himself, I believe is the technical Christian term, which still didn't fix it, because everything's the same, except now some people get to go to heaven, hooray. But the world, and humanity, and sin are all still how they were, and evil and suffering are still there, including ones that are not caused by humans at all, but instead by God directly, I would assume. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, etc. Humans are not doing that. Why does this all seem so incompetent? If I didn't know any better, I would say this sounds more like a patchwork of excuses than a true story about a perfect God.
So you can see the world as evil.
See, that's another example of where you should have slowed down a little bit, because I don't know if you just said you can see the world as evil, or you can't see the world as evil. And in context, I could see you saying either one, so it makes it really confusing. I guess maybe it's a little more likely that you're saying you can't say the world is evil, in which case, okay, but you would still say that there are evil events that happen, right? And that suffering objectively occurs, and that itself is also an evil. At least I assume you would say that, correct me if I'm wrong. And if that's the case, then nothing you said addresses anything. You're just sort of rambling about how much humans suck without actually tying it to the point. I will say, though, to your credit, you have not made the argument, but atheists don't believe in objective morality, so they can't say evil's a thing at all. You didn't say that, which honestly puts your video above like 90% of the ones that address the problem of evil.
You see, there's no reason to validate the absence of God.
You see, you say. So what you just said was supposed to establish that somehow. Your sloppy, pointless, non-addressing of the problem of evil is supposed to establish that there's no reason to think there's no God. How? You addressed one argument, which itself doesn't even address the existence of God directly. And you did it poorly, but assuming that you did it well, how does that eliminate everything else? What's the assumption here, that this is the only argument possible?
Because the fact that there's goodness shows there's God.
The fact that there's goodness shows there's God. Okay, well, I don't think that there is objectively, but assuming I did, okay, how? This seems to be your argument regardless of what you're talking about. Like, the fact that there's goodness shows there's God. The fact that there's a world shows there's God. The fact that there's human bodies shows there's God. Why? Because I guess you want it to. I don't fucking know. You don't make arguments for these things, you just assert them.
The evil in this world is evil done by men.
Again, I'm a little iffy on exactly what was said there, but I think it's basically goodness shows there's God, and all the evil is done by men. So God gets all the credit for all the good stuff, humans get all the credit for all the bad stuff, and I guess because he says that's how it has to be, that shows there's God because he's assigned goodness to God. Apparently failing to consider that the rest of us might not have already done that he might need to convince us first that that's something that should be done. It's like the basic assumption here is that everyone already agrees with all the Christian premises, and all he has to do is just remind them of them, and all of a sudden they'll be convinced. Like we're all just temporarily embarrassed Christians. It's a fascinating mindset to witness. I do get frustrated with it, obviously, but I always come back to it because I find it endlessly interesting.
Think of anything in this world that's evil, that's not man, except disease.
Think of anything that's evil that's not done by man, I think is the point of what you're saying. And the only one that you can think of is disease, which is theologically very bizarre. Normally, disease is not taken to be the only natural evil. Normally, you would include floods, earthquakes, droughts, diseases, fires, volcanoes, hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, meteorites, I suppose. Even things like extreme cold and extreme heat that hurt people, I would assume. Maybe even animal attacks. Why are you saying the only one other than things that humans do to humans is disease? Just Google natural evil, man.
And disease again. There was no disease in the beginning. The initial design was that we're to live in communion with God forever.
Yeah, and that instantly fucked up because God put the tree there and put a talking snake in it, knowing Adam and Eve would fall for it because they didn't yet know the difference between good and evil. Are we really doing this, man? Like pretending that in Christian theology the whole universe is not exactly according to God's plan? But why are we talking about this anyway? What is this supposed to do for you? You know what? Fine. Problem of evil, absolutely stupid. Toss it in the garbage. I don't care. The problem of evil is not why I don't believe you. It's not why most people don't believe you. The reason most people don't believe you is because you've got nothing. When you're asked for something, you go off on some tangent like this and make excuses for something nobody even said. You toss out red herrings trying to misdirect people onto some irrelevant thing to avoid supporting your view. Well, no, we're not doing that. We're not spending the rest of the video arguing about the problem of evil. If you want me to believe in God, convince me there's a God. The merits or lack thereof of this random argument from your critics are of no significance to that.
But man himself chose to sin, chose to rebel against God on their own accord, given the free will to do what they wanted, and all darkness entered the world. Sin is darkness, sin is death. And that's the sickness that we all have.
Okay, yeah, it's great. I've heard the excuses before. It doesn't matter. Can we get back to the topic, please?
So, I think I've explained God's existence. So what I'm saying is...
So what you're saying is...
all people, I believe, honestly, know that there's a God that exists.
All people know God exists. Yeah, so you don't have to try then. You got nothing, but it doesn't matter because you don't have to have anything. Everyone already believes you. I approve of this strategy. That's good. Do that.
I think it's those untouched places in the world, that those rural, tribal places that have never heard the gospel. I feel like those are people who truly do not know there's a God.
What? Rural, tribal places in the world who have never heard the gospel truly don't know there's a God. Really? Well then, it's not quite as fucking obvious as you insist it is it? Because they can see the world too. If it's written on our hearts, it's written on theirs too. And yet apparently they require further information from other people to get the idea that that is in fact the case. Well, that shuts down an awful lot of what you just got done saying. So what's your idea of how this works then? You got an uncontacted tribe out in the middle of nowhere that don't know God exists because nobody's ever told them so. And then what? Some random European shows up and says, "Hi, there's this thing called God. Did you know that?" And all of a sudden, having heard that God exists, the sheer obviousness of the concept washes over them and belief in God instantly slams into their brain unavoidably. Is that how it works? Because that sounds a little stupid. Now consider this scenario. What if there's a person who's not in an uncontacted tribe, who was brought up not being taught the gospel, and not being taught that there's a God, and therefore truly not believing it in exactly the same way? And then he grows up and people start rambling about God and rambling about the gospel at him. That's me. Now, what do you expect to happen? That you open your mouth, you breathe one word about God's existence, and all of a sudden I just know that you're right? Because God's name has so much power. Is this the kind of religious fantasy that you have in your head? Well, that's incredibly pathetic, for one thing. And for another thing, that means I know for a fact that you're incorrect, which means you really should not be addressing this video to me or people like me. These are ridiculous, comforting lies that religious people tell each other in church. They want to feel like they have a truly universal belief system, one that's undeniably compelling, that's so obviously special and unique that everyone immediately sees that it's true as soon as they hear about it. But this circle jerk is to comfort you. It's not supposed to be to convince outsiders. The outsiders are the people you're talking about, so they already know that this is false. When you misapply it like this, it's inevitably going to go wrong. But I don't think you know that, because I think you honestly think this is true. Or at least that's what's suggested by the fact that you directed this to us rather than to Christians.
But every person in this world knows God exists.
You just said that uncontacted tribes who haven't heard about it don't know that. They're people in the world too, you know. Either everyone knows it or some people don't. You can't have both.
It's just extreme rejection because it's acknowledging the life that they live. It's the requirement to change that makes people afraid.
No, it's you constantly coming with bullshit like this, rather than anything that shows that you're right. You seem like you'll take any excuse to avoid the point.
So you hear these dishonest arguments, these dishonest questions about, oh, let me see his medical records, let me see this, let me see that.
Let me see his medical records, Jesus's. Look, I know you're exaggerating for effect to try to make this seem unreasonable, but how unreasonable is it, really, to ask that the supernatural claims of a religion be backed up first before they're believed? If people asking for some kind of meaningful evidence of that are being excessively probing in their questions, then maybe your religion just doesn't hold up real well to scrutiny. Maybe it's not nearly as obvious as you think it is.
Yeah, Jesus is the most historically proven figure to ever exist.
Oh, really? What about JFK? He's on camera.
The only reason we don't study him is because he holds moral power.
I think you said the only reason we don't study him is because he holds moral power. What do you mean we don't study him? What world are you living in where Jesus is some kind of ignored figure? Like, okay, not everyone pays attention to historical studies of Jesus. Not everyone cares about history, and not everyone cares about the same things. That doesn't mean we collectively, like as a species, don't study Jesus. What a preposterous claim. And then to say people are avoiding the whole topic because Jesus holds moral power. This is basically a repetition of that thing you said before, that atheists avoid the whole Jesus and God topic because whenever these names are spoken, they have such power that it makes the atheists feel convicted in their souls, which ignores the reality of the situation to such an extreme degree it seems almost impossible.
It's because what he did demands a reaction.
Okay, how about meh?
And I've just been seeing, the way people act when you bring up Jesus. It's this, there's always, you only see the reaction in their eyes. You see it hitting them deeply. And then you see the moment they lie to themselves saying, no, God is not real. You see it, the way they just snuff it out.
What look are you talking about that you're seeing? Is it this one? Because that's not what you think it is.
You see it.
We've got the face reading expert up in here, people, reading your innermost thoughts. That's gotta be accurate, right? There's no way for bias to creep into something like that. That Homelander clip really sums up well how I feel right now. Anyway, now he goes off preaching for a while, and who cares? Skipping. It must be because I'm scared to hear about Jesus or something. Leaving aside the fact that I listened to it like 4 times before I finally made up my mind to delete it. Anyway, a little pointless that one, but hey, I gotta do something, and that was kind of fun, I guess. If you would, before you go, please do subscribe and like. And I don't take sponsorships. If you like the channel, please do consider supporting. Supporters, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Just so people know, Patreon is the primary platform for that. It has the lowest fees. Regardless though, wherever you choose to support, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.